So these are all different sketchbooks that I've made over the years. Some of them were created as part of bookmaking classes, sketchbook making classes like these two, where they're just covered in decorative paper, so it makes them look a little extra fancy. And then other ones were ones that I created as part of my own teaching with my students in a bookmaking unit that we did. I love making my own sketchbook. I don't do it often enough. And with Selfiecember coming up, I kept finding myself wishing that I had a sketchbook available that I could just dedicate to the month of December's art challenge. And I was like, well, I'm gonna use a bunch of different media and I don't really know what size I'm gonna work. Those kinds of decisions can often lead me to run astray when it comes to having like a committed daily practice. And then I said to myself, just make one, make a sketchbook that has mixed media paper in it so that it'll handle whatever kind of paper you have. If I want to get crazy outside the box, I can always glue it in after the fact, but then I'm in control of the paper, I'm in control of the size, and I get the joy of making my own sketchbook for this challenge. So these are some of the more recently made books that I've done. This one is with mixed media paper and then cardboard for both of the covers. And then you just cover it. This one I painted right on the cardboard, both of them. I painted on the cardboard and drew on it and stamped on it. And then on the inside, I taped down some decorative papers that I had lying around. It was part of a workshop session I did last year, I think. So it's a combination of, art that I made and from the different workshops and notes that I took from the different teachers, which makes it kind of great. It's got everything. It's got Terry Runyon was one of the teachers for Blobs to Birds, which is so fun. So this one has mixed media paper in it. The workshops were also featuring drawing stuff too. So we were kind of encouraged to have a mix of papers. So I decided to separate that out. The size of these books, I wanted to work large because I wanted options. I could still do a small artwork within a large sketchbook, but I couldn't do a large artwork in a small sketchbook. And then as far as the formatting, it was dictated by the cardboard that I had access to, because we were actually shown the use of cardboard for a cover, which I'd never done. I'd always done it with, cardstock or decorative papers, but this is great because this is solid and I like a hard-covered sketchbook. So this one got a little funkier just in the fact that I've got all of my paper didn't quite work for this, and this is a bigger mix of paper. So there's drawing paper, and so it could handle all sorts of drawing media. I've collaged into it, and there's, all sorts of stuff. But the goal was that I would have a place to put my drawings with different kinds of drawing paper based on what I had on hand, and then a place to do more heavy-duty mixed media painting style artworks. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to make my sketchbook for my Selfiecember art challenge. And then everything can be housed in one sketchbook, and I'll have the fun at the end of the month to be able to flip through and see all of the self-portraits that I create this December. So let's make sketchbook. Now there's lots of different ways to make them. This one is bound with glue. So the pages are folded to create the different sections, registers, and then we clipped it and we put glue on the edge of the papers to seal the sections together, and then it was further supported by adding, gluing on the cover. So this is a great way to do it. This is a little more intense than I want to get into because Selfiecember starts tomorrow. So we're going to work a little faster. Other options are just sew them. That's how all the rest of these were made, different stitches. So this one you stack it up, you use your owl to kind of measure out and pierce it, and then you use the stitch to get along the edge. This one just has a really simple stitch on the seam, so it goes through the outside. Again, you use your owl, and it's knotted in the middle and then tied to create the seal. So it's a very, very easy way to stitch it together. Same with this one, exact same technique. The bigger ones are also sewn. They're done the same way, except for there's multiple stitches. It's this same stitch. It's just done because it's a bigger book. There's more holes to it to, to secure it along the pages. When you go to the middle, you can see, not anymore because this painting kind of covers it up, but you can see where the thread was tied. And same thing with this one. So for this sketchbook, I'm gonna try a different technique so that I can avoid sewing. I like sewing a lot, and I really enjoy sewing together a book. There's something very meditative about it, and making your own sketchbook is a very special practice. I feel like it kind of, I love buying sketchbooks too. It's so fun to go to the art stores and see all of the array of sketchbooks and pick one out and be like, oh, brand new sketchbook. But making it yourself grounds you in it a little bit more, and it makes it a little more special, especially if you make them and then use them, whereas these ones I have yet to fill them. So I'm a little less, I'm more detached from the small books than I am from the ones that I made and then used right away. So we're gonna do a process that doesn't involve any sewing at all, with the exception of maybe adding a cover at the end. But the actual building up of the pages is gonna be done with a sheet of paper, folding, and scissors. So let's get those supplies out. So like I said, I want the option to use pretty much any media I wish for my Selfiecember challenge. So I have this great big sheet of Canson mixed media paper. These pages are 18 by 24 inches, which will be perfect for this. So I'm gonna tear a sheet out and show you how to build up your sketchbook. All right, this is really giant paper, so it might be a little hard to see all of it with the camera frame, but we're gonna do our best. I tore out 2 sheets because I wanna make sure I have enough pages to get through the whole month. So what you're gonna do is, you are gonna fold your paper in half the long way. And actually, you wanna make sure that your folds are really clean. That's the one thing, when you're making books, you have to be very careful and precise in your paper folding. Really any paper folding technique that you're doing for art. So I'm gonna line up my corners. You could measure it if you wanted to. You could measure it that way and then, you know, mark it out. But Selfiecember starts tomorrow, so I want to get to it. I'd love to spend all day making a sketchbook, but I don't have all day. So we're gonna do it nice and quick. You can't see that. So I fold it in half and I'm gonna squash it down. And I really wanna make sure my folds are sharp. So I'm gonna grab a marker. Actually, I'm gonna grab my paintbrush handle because that is what I found. And I'm just gonna really squash along there. You could use a bone folder if you have one. We're doing this nice and quick today, so I'm not going to dig out my bone folder. I'm gonna unfold it. Now I'm gonna fold these sides into the middle, and paper has a grain. So depending on the way the grain of your paper goes, it's going to be more easy to fold it one way versus another way. So just kind of know that. It's not that your paper doesn't, you know, can't fold all the ways, but it is gonna fight you a little bit, one direction or another. And that goes with all, it goes with paper, that goes with cardboard, it goes with everything. Fabric, right? Here's the weave of the fabric. You know, cutting along that works better, tearing along that works better than against the grain. But if you're careful and persistent, you can get it to work just fine. All right. Now I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to fold these the opposite way. It'll make it easier to cut it in the long run. Okay, so now we have it folded into quarters. Now we're going to do it in the opposite direction. So I am letting the paper size dictate the sketchbook size, which is something you might want to consider. You could do less folds if you want a larger sketchbook and then do more registers to build up your sketchbook if you want to. I have a feeling that December is going to be a pretty busy month around here, so I'm going to keep it smaller. I might do 2 sketchbooks. But actually, you know what? Small is a good challenge. We're going small. Selfiecember will be a small collection of selfies. Plus then the great thing is with the smaller sketchbook, I can carry this with me more places. So if I'm, you know, waiting to pick up my, you know, my kiddo from school, I can bring my sketchbook and I can put down the the mirror or, you know, put on my cell phone camera and I can get a selfie and draw a self-portrait that, you know, right there on the spot. So I always have drawing stuff with me in my purse. And I'm trying to be better about keeping my sketchbook on me when I'm out and about too. All right, so now I have folded it into quarters, both directions. So now we're gonna get out some scissors and we're gonna start cutting. Okay. So we're gonna cut on the fold carefully, but not all the way. We want the paper to remain in one piece. Otherwise, you're gonna have to sew, which is fine, but I don't wanna have to sew this book. At least not for a single section of pages. So I've stopped at the last fold, see? Now I'm gonna, because it's so big, I'm gonna flip it around and I'm gonna cut in the opposite direction from the edge. But again, I'm gonna stop when I hit that last fold line. So I'm gonna cut all the way up to the line, the fold, and stop. Okay, so far so good. I'm gonna flip it around and I'm gonna do the same thing again. I'm gonna cut it from this edge up to that fold. And then we're almost done. Okay, so now we have our paper like so. After fighting with the paper a little bit, I have decided that I'm going to do a simple sewn simple stitch on the bound edge. To create my paper sections. So I'm cutting it apart into sections. The fold was already there. So I'm just gonna have my sketchbook be like that, and then I'm gonna bind it at the top so that I can just flip it open for my self-portraits. And then I'm gonna make sure that I have enough pages and so I'm going to stack up my pages so that the folds are all going in the same direction. And my sketchbook is going to be, this is pretty thick paper, so I might actually break this into smaller sections to make it work better so that it's a little less, you know, bowing in the middle. But let's see how many self-portraits we can get out of this. So I like to leave, if I do the first page and if I do front and back, I can get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28. 30, 32, perfect. So one sheet of 18 by 24 inch paper is giving me, folded into quarters both ways, is giving me just the perfect amount of pages for a sketchbook. But because I'm going to sew anyway, I'm going to break these up into smaller registers. So I'm going to divide it into half. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4. And then when I put them together with a bound, they're gonna be a little less crazy. Okay, so I've got 2 registers that should be the same amount of pages. Now we're gonna get out some embroidery floss and we're gonna quick stitch them together along with a cutting board and our owl to mark them. I learned a really cool trick from a workshop session that I took a while back. So we're going to take a scrap sheet of paper And it doesn't really matter how wide it is, but I do want it to be the same length as my sketchbook pages. So I'm gonna just eyeball cut it down. Now I'm gonna fold it in half, like so. And any scrap paper works for this. I'm using pretty thick drawing paper, so that's what I grabbed, but there would actually be even better. Now this is the point where if you are very particular and you want to measure this out, you can. I'm just gonna, and I could even, actually you don't have to measure it at all. We're gonna fold it into thirds. And mark the spots that you're gonna focus on. So we're gonna create a stitch with only 2 holes. Very similar to these books. Super simple, it's gonna be great. So what I like to do is we're gonna sew each of these registers of papers together, and then we'll sew like the whole thing together. So we're gonna do a little extra sewing. I embroider into my paintings. So I have some embroidery floss around. You could use regular sewing thread also. Oops. Now, this is our guide for where we're gonna put the holes. If you're a little nervous about it, you could always just take one sheet out. Do that. Line up your guide, the center, fold. Then you're gonna take your owl, or you could use a push pin if you wanted. And we're gonna, with a cutting board underneath, we are gonna pierce through the papers. These are very sharp, so if you have one of these, super cool, but be careful. You don't wanna stab yourself. And then making sure that I don't move the paper, I'm gonna line the owl up again with that crease and pierce through the paper. And now I have marked where my stitch is going. So I can stack that paper on top of these. Make sure they're lined up. If you want to, you could use a clip to hold them in place, or a paper clip. These registers of paper aren't very thick, so I'm just gonna grab a paper clip just to kind of secure them so they don't wiggle around on me, because we're gonna be moving them quite a bit while we stitch. So these or a binder clip work great. Now, I've got everything lined up where I want it. Using the holes that I made with my template, I'm gonna pierce through all of the pages. And actually, while I'm at it, I'm gonna do both sections, because then, well, I've already attached those. So we'll go back to our original template, line it up with our paper. There we go. And put our hole through it. Put our hole through it. I like to lift it up just to make sure it's pierced. Then we can go and reassemble our pages for this register. Get our paper clips or our binder clips. Get our pages nice and lined up and centered on those folds. Paper clip them. To fold it just to make sure that everything is happy. And it might not be totally perfect, and I'm okay with that. And pierce through so that we have lined up stitch marks. Great. Done with our owl. Now you can pick out your thread color. I have not decided how I'm going to do my cover for this. I'm going to sew my inside pages first, and then I'm going to attach the whole thing together. So I'm just going to pick, color that makes me happy, or that I have a lot of. So an easy way to measure it is to get yourself 3 times, a little more than 3 times the height of your sketchbook binding. And if you're nervous about it, you can cut more if you want to. And then we need our needle. My needle, I have a traveling embroidery kit too. So I think I actually snagged my needle holder from there. That's It's okay. I always have backup needles around. And these needles, these are just embroidery needles, milliner needles. Anything with kind of a bigger eye works great, because that's where I'm at in my vision journey. So I'm going to thread my needle, and you could always use less thread. This is actually going to be too much. So the cool thing about embroidery floss is it comes with 6 strands already together, and you can separate that to thin your thread. I like a chunky thread on my book bindings, but I don't have my other needles around. So when you art everywhere and anywhere, you end up with your supplies scattered to the wind sometimes. So I think they're upstairs, my travel embroidery kit. So I've thinned it down to 3 strands. I'm gonna thread my needle like so. I'm not going to tie a knot. So we're gonna do that at the very end. We only have to tie a finishing knot. So I've threaded my needle like that. Now we want our thread to end up on the inside. Well, it's up to you. You can do it either way. Depending on the way you thread it, you're either gonna end up with your knot on the outside or your knot on the inside. And actually, I'm gonna bind this. So I don't mind if the thread's knotted on the outside, because then it's not sticking in the middle of my book. So I'm going in from the outside, and then I'm going back through the other one. So my thread is on the outside of my book. See that? And then all we have to do, well, actually I'm gonna double it up just for extra stability. So I'm gonna go back through the first hole and then back out the second hole. And I'm gonna do that a couple times. It's not necessary, but because I know I'm gonna be carrying this sketchbook around for the next month and be arting everywhere, I wanna do that. So then I've got it all pulled nice and tight, and then I'm just gonna double knot it near one of the holes, because then it'll kind of, you could do it anywhere. You could put it in the middle. I like to do it up by the hole, one of the holes. And you just hold it nice and tight for that double knot so that your stitching is very secure. So we don't want our books wiggling apart. So you kind of get that one nice and tight. If you got a buddy around who can hold your first knot for you, that's great. And then double knot it. Just for fun, I'm gonna do a 3rd knot. It doesn't need it. And then if this was gonna be the outside of the book, you can do cool stuff with the extra thread. I'm just gonna trim it off because I know I'm gonna put a cover on it to further stabilize it. And then this register is bound and ready for art making. So I can take these off. I don't need them anymore. One done. We're gonna do the same thing to this guy. We need a cover for this book. So I'm gonna find just some thick paper around. Oh, I know. I have a bunch of these old folders, and I'm gonna use that for my cover. It's gonna be great. So I want my cover to be a little bit bigger than my pages because I want to protect them a little bit. That is completely personal choice, up to you. It doesn't matter. Sometimes it's nice to have it flush. Sometimes it's nice to have it a little bit bigger. It's all good. All right, I'm gonna use my template again. This is already folded because it's a binder. It's a little bit bigger than my template page, but that's okay, because I can just kind of rough eyeball it. I'm gonna punch holes using my template. I'm gonna get some more thread. So I'm gonna separate my strings again. If you go slow, you should be able to get them to separate without getting tangled up. Or you can just kind of pinch them and pull out because they're gonna like twist up. The other thing I never do is I never get rid of extra embroidery floss. If it's super tiny, I get rid of it. But if it's like that, I can use that in a piece. That's good thread. Don't waste it. I'm gonna thread my needle again. Again, I'm just gonna do the same stitch. This one it's gonna be easier if I do it this way. I'm gonna go through the outside. Nope, I'm gonna go from the inside of one section on one edge, and then I'm gonna go out through the hole in the other section. And now I'm attaching the sections together. Then I'm gonna go up to the top of that second section. I'm gonna peekaboo out that hole. Then I'm gonna go back in through the top of that one. So now they're attached. There's one string that is holding all of these together. And I'm gonna leave a tail for tying it. I'm gonna make sure I double knot it. And I'm gonna repeat that. It's not necessary, but I just really wanna make sure this is secure. This is not the easiest way to do this. This is where I struggle with bookmaking, because I go for it a little too fast, and then I make some mistakes along the way. So I'm going to tie these sections together so that they're secure. And there we go. Then I'm going to go back through this hole, because now I want to attach it to my cover. Now I'm going to line it up. That's a lot of thread. It's okay. It's fine. I'm going to go back through this hole, and now I'm going to attach it to the cover. Sorry. Keep pulling it out of frame. Now I do need to go back through. Whoops. I'm lost. I'm lost in the pages. There we go. Goodness. Okay. This is getting nuts. This is getting nuts, everybody. And then, I know, it's really hard to follow. Apologize. So I'm just kind of zigzagging through the sections so that everything ends up attached in the end. This is not a masterpiece. This is not my best bookbinding experience ever. But I'm also rusty. I haven't done it in a long time, and I have lost my tie thread. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. We're all right. As long as we end up with the threads, the ends of the threads, back together where they're supposed to be. We did it. Okay, everything is bound. Now we're going to tie it off. Now, I'm going to show you on those bigger books how it worked out better. This one I haven't done this in a bit, and I didn't do a practice one. I just decided to go for it. So some mistakes were made along the way, and that's okay. But I do want to show you how else you could have done it. So I've made sure that it is nice and tight, multiple knots. My sketchbook is now intact. It's pretty thick and crazy, but it will work. I've got a sketchbook, it's got a cover, it's bound together. I have enough pages for the drawing challenge. Success! So if you were doing this again or on your own, this book has the thicker cover, and because we used cardboard, we needed to fold, and because we knew a lot of pages were going to go into it, we had to fold the edge. We had to do kind of like a trifold so that there was a binding, the binding of the book section, like a hardcover book, right? So, because it's not a pamphlet, it's hard to tell on this one. I should have made my binding bigger for the paper I put in there, because you don't end up with it being like ginormous. But this one has one register, so all of these pages were folded together and attached, and then lots of sections of stitching. Now I think when I did this before, I didn't stitch the pages separately. And I think I would have had an easier time on this little guy if I had just gone for it. But I was trying to stabilize it and make it easier, and yet I made it harder. So if you just stitch through the paper section, the register, right to your cardboard or cover, and then back again, just like we did, it'll be great. And it might be easier to see in this guy. So this one has a wider binding, and you can see the stitches. Now, the reason that it's all the way to the left is because this is so I could add more registers of paper. So when you look at it, there's a gap there. Can't really see it, sorry. So I can add to this sketchbook, which is really cool. So if you do a bigger cover with a bigger binding, you can then add more registers of paper and have it grow. Like that would be really cool for if you were doing like a 365-day project and you wanted to keep everything together, but you know, you didn't want to make like a 365-page sketchbook right off the bat. Make your cover big enough, wide enough here, so that you can have enough registers and then just add it as you go. That would be very cool. So, not the greatest demonstration, but I achieved what I wanted. I have a sketchbook. I'm ready for Selfiecember, and I can't wait to share that art adventure with you over the coming days. So have a great day.